lunch, mate. My ass.
I'm only 4. Bonjour, Monsieur Pussycat.
Cracking toast, Robert.
Start spreading the news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the short podcast about short films. I am your host, and we are discussing the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Today's episode is about the 29th year of the award at the 33rd Academy Awards, which celebrates the films of 1960. Today's guest is on the show for the 4th time, last appearing on the 1943 episode discussing Yankee Doodle Mouse and the other nominees. Please welcome the host of the 300 Passions podcast and our favorite short, Miss Zita Short. Hello, Zita.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back on and very excited to discuss this specific crop of nominees.
Yes, this is a good crop we've got here. But remind us, what is your familiarity with the Best Animated Short category?
Well, it's been limited so far. I'm not an aficionado like yourself, but being on the podcast a couple of times has definitely allowed me to familiarize myself with the styles that were popular during specific time periods, and I haven't been on in a while, and I definitely have noticed the leap between the 40s and the 60s in terms of how experimental they're willing to get and just the range of nominees. You wouldn't have seen a production from a communist country getting nominated in World War II.
No, you certainly would. Well, maybe in World War, specifically during World War II, consider we pretended we liked the Russians back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, since your last time was on 1943, you have definitely missed a lot of developments. Like you missed the entire run of UPA, which is one of the most influential studios at this time. Like they're very influential for like our winner this year and a lot of the style of a lot of these short films at this time. But you can listen to any of the episodes from the 1950s, like, and you'll get the gist of that. But yes, let's get into these nominees then, shall we? This year has 5. Our first nominee and the year's winner is Munro, directed by Gene Deitch. This is the first nomination and first win for producer William L. Snyder, who ran Rembrandt Films out of Prague in Czechoslovakia. While the studio was around since 1949, operating mainly as a distributor for Czech films, Snyder, an American, wanted his studio to make some films that could do well with American audiences. So he hired some Czech animators from the studio Bratří Triku, and sought out an American animation director who could help out. In comes Gene Deitch, whom we previously discussed as his nominee, Sydney's Family Tree. That film he made at Terrytoons, but shortly left to form his own studios called simply Gene Deitch Associates Incorporated. Snyder desperately wanted Deitch, but Deitch wanted to focus on his own films for his own studio, not fly off to Prague to make some films for someone else. But when Snyder offered to produce Deitch's passion projects if he helped direct some of the films Rembrandt was working on, Deitch couldn't pass it up and then flew out to Prague. So the deal played out. Deitch helped Rembrandt and Snyder. Snyder then let Deitch make his 2 passion projects. First was Samson Scrap, a TV pilot about a man who runs a junkyard. The pilot was popular and even was shortlisted for this category and got lots of offers, but Snyder kept asking for more and more money and eventually drove away all the TV offers, and it faded into obscurity. I'm stumbling a lot in this paragraph. The second is the film we are talking about today, Munro. Based on a story by Jules Feiffer, it is about a 4-year-old boy who is accidentally drafted, but no one seems to realize that he's just a child and shouldn't be there. And his famous line in it is, "I'm only 4." Zita, what did you think of our winner?
I was definitely intrigued by it, and I'm sorry, I feel as though I just have to warn the listeners. I'm going to talk about politics a lot this episode because I do think it is fascinating that so many of these 60s shorts definitely have more of a left-wing bent than you expect out of animated shorts. And this would seem to anticipate, in many ways, a lot of the sort of anti-war protests that would occur when the Vietnam War began. And it really sort of picks up on the atmosphere that might have been in the air at the time. So I certainly found that fascinating. And in terms of its visual style, it's very different than what you're getting out of Disney, where it's bright colors, characters with very expressive faces, a lot of slapstick comedy. I would argue that this is more minimalistic in many ways. And it's also intriguing that the color palette employed is not beautiful in the traditional sense. There's a lot of maroon and orange and sort of off-putting visuals at times, but I definitely think that it gets its point across. And props to the Academy for recognizing something like this. And I guess final note, I wonder what you think of this period in the Academy's history in terms of them sort of being stuck between the old guard who wanted to nominate financially struggling musicals. And then you do seem to have this faction of younger voters who are interested in foreign products and who do want to nominate movies that are more interested in commenting on a lot of the hot button issues of the period. And I do find it fascinating that a lot of films from communist nations were nominated, because even though I was a little bit off with my earlier description of the World War II era, I have to assume that in the 50s, nominating a communist production would have been unthinkable.
Yeah, so this category is famously like one that many people don't care about, but I think what that actually kind of helps it in this period when when trying to get some more outsider kind of wins, because it's like the only people who are going to be watching the 5 nominees and then voting on them, as is the standard for these categories, would be people who are like genuinely interested in film and generally interested in wanting to see these shorts and like giving each them a chance. And so oh and so they're more likely to be open to some more like outsider or kind of styles and kind of ideas and stuff. So it's just like that's why we get winners like Munro, and later we'll get stuff like air sets and like so many great weird winners in this category. And it's just like, and we are just in a very very interesting time in this category, just as we have gotten rid of like a lot of the big studios, those in Hollywood, but who are making these short films, and now it's like all that's left is these independent and foreign productions, and that just suddenly take over or and start winning these big Hollywood awards. And it's just very, very fascinating. And it's like this is such a great way to start it too, because it's like we've got this. First of all, this is like, as you mentioned, like this is an anti-war short, and it does represent a lot of like the ideas that are going to come forth once the US gets really involved with the Vietnam War, and it's just going to be, and it's just like this is before like we started, like before people were drafted, before US even got involved, but still like these anti-war sentiments are still very strong after World War II and the Korean War, and before they really get riled up. So it's just, but another thing is this short is just really, really fun. Like that, I feel like one of the main reasons the short one is just because it's a really good short. And like you mentioned, the art style it's very limited, very minimalist. It's very I don't want to say unpolished, because it's like these are very well trained animators who are making this. It's like it's a very intentional design choice, but it's also just like it's a very simplistic animation. Like only a few lines make each character. And it's just like Munro himself is just small little a circle with a tiny little body. As just like he's adorable. Well, as
Mm.
just we watch him go, and this short is just very, very funny. How it's almost kind of, I want to say Kafka-esque, because it's very much like something akin to The Trial or something, in where you have this central character who's in a situation he doesn't understand, and everyone around him just doesn't realize the absurdity of everything that's going on. It just as this is how things are supposed to be. Like they don't realize that Munro, he's just a little boy. They think he's a soldier. They think he's just faking being 4 years old, and so it's very, very absurdist and very, very fun.
Yes, certainly. And I think it's sort of inspiring that it managed to win at the beginning of the decade. And from what you said, it really ushered in a new era for the category.
Hmm. Really, like with this, and also I guess it really started with Moonbird last year, or which was the first independent winner by John Hubley. And so from then on, like the Academy just it really kind of stopped like giving the big studios wins. I think there were a couple, like I think Disney got a couple wins with like Winnie the Pooh later on and like Pink Panther is made by Patty Freeling, who are like the offshoots of what Warner Brothers used to be. But for the most part, these are just small animation studios just making shorts because they can, I guess. And then they eventually find themselves wound up at the Oscars for just because they were trying to fulfill themselves artistically. And that is what the Oscars are really for, in my opinion. Is just as the people want to make great art, and then the Academy sees it and is like, hey, give you an award for that. That was pretty good.
Hmm. But it is intriguing that they were able to keep up with the times in a way and move relatively quickly, because I know that one of the big criticisms of the animated feature category is that for several years they sort of just kept giving awards to Pixar
Hmm.
movies, even when the critics weren't quite as ecstatic about them. And you look at a film like Brave and you think, well, that's not their best work. Really? Are we giving this the same amount of praise that was accorded to something like The Incredibles? And it does seem like in animated short, they were less nervous about moving away from the big studios being the default choice.
Well, so the thing with that is, it's like in this category, that was kind of a big thing where it's just like every single award went to one of the four studios at this time. And like for the first, I think the number is 27 years of this category, it just went to four or five people. Like because Walt Disney won like the first 9 years in a row. Then we had Fred Quimby and Edward Selzer from MGM and Warner Brothers, and then Stephen Basustow from UPA. Those four people won in the first nearly 30 years of this category. And then but then what happened is just that the Hollywood animated short just died. It just kind of died because the theatrical short was less popular because or less profitable, well, because of television and coming in and just draining a lot of the profits from the theatrical business. And so the short films were the first thing to get cut because it was just a like an excess spending into the studios. And so it's less that the Academy is choosing to go for choosing to nominate more outsider work. It's just they have nothing else left to nominate.
Mm.
And it's just like, and also half the stuff that is coming out of the remaining studios is just kind of trash, considering it's just they're putting no money into this. They're losing a lot of their best talents, and so it's just like, it's like half the remaining studios here are like Walter Lantz Studios and Terry Toons, who were always making trash and continued to make trash up until the 70s. And so it's the Academy is just kind of like, what do we do here? And so the only real choice is to, well, first to get some of these, to nominate some of these outsider works, and then once they're in the nomination zone, and it's just like all that's left is for some Academy members, they're forced to see all 5 nominees. They can't just be like, oh, I saw this one in theaters, like with the animated feature category. They can't just be like, oh, I saw this one, I don't care about the other 4, I'll just vote for the one I saw. No, they have to watch all 5, and then they pick based on that. And so, and something that happens in a lot of these like in these in between years, where it's like you still have some Hollywood shorts, but you also have like 1 or 2 outsider ones, it becomes like, well, I have 4 shorts here that are just kind of the same thing I've been used to for the last 30 years, and then there's this one that looks a little different. That one sticks out more, so I think I'll vote for that. Yeah, it's just a very, very weird time, very fun time for this category.
Yes, and what you're alluding to is very disappointing in a way, in that I think that short films, at least nowadays, are seen as these sort of incubators for emerging artists, and they exist to prove that this kid has got something, and if we allow him or her to direct a feature film, at least we have this proof of concept here where they've displayed that they know how to make a movie. And it does mean that in some cases, these shorts feel as though they're serving a practical purpose, but they don't really aspire towards anything greater. Whereas with a lot of these animated shorts, when you have people who treat them in the same way that they would a feature film, I do think that you notice that they are higher quality products. And so it is saddening to hear that these big studios eventually decided to write these projects off because presumably they weren't earning enough money.
Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons I made this whole podcast to begin with, because so many people just view short films as just like, oh, it's the thing that you make in film school to show how good you are at filmmaking before you move on to real movies, like making the feature films. And it's just like, no, there's so much different. It's such a different skill set to make a great short film versus a feature film, and short films are such a distinct art in their own right, and so it shouldn't be just viewed as like, oh, they're just like feature films but smaller. It's like, no, there's so much more than that. And it's just like, it is so hard to make like such a compelling story within like 10 minutes, and so to see these shorts that are able to accomplish that and accomplish that well, like Munro, is such an incredible feat. And so it is important to like look at these and appreciate them and talk about them, because people rarely do.
Yes, and with a couple of exceptions, I feel as though anyone who has been to film school will have seen the 4 or 5 very famous short films. And then even in the cinephile community, I do think that there is a tendency to just neglect them and to avoid going any further. And you see 1 or 2 Maya Deren shots, and you kind of get what Stan Brackage's deal is, but beyond that, you know nothing. And it's sort of a shame. And I think a big part of it is just that they're not accessible. in many cases. You can go online and illegally find a lot of feature films. If I want to find an Anya Svata shot, it can be very difficult in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is one of the main reasons why like short films have fallen out of like viewing, because it's like the theater was like the main way that people got to experience short films, and that's why they were popular. So when theaters just stopped showing short films at around this time period, it's just like, where do people go to find them now? No, it's just like, and luckily, like you've got like the streaming services are actually kind of bringing back like short films in a way. Like, not, they're not bringing back short films, but I'm saying like they are making them more easily distributed, and even like putting them just right alongside like the feature films and stuff. Like you've got like Netflix has a lot of short films that they're putting out there, and like Disney Plus, of course, has their whole back catalog, but they're also making new short films too. It's just like the streaming has surprisingly just been like one of the best ways to like revitalize the popularity of short film. And of course, hasn't come back that much, but I could see like more and more people watching more and more short films as time goes on, and as now like as these streamers produce more and more. And just like, maybe there will be a resurgence of popularity. I don't know. Probably not to the extent that we saw them back in the 40s, but maybe a little bit, at least more than we've had for the past like half a century or something.
Mm. Yes, I would like to see them make a comeback. And I do feel as though the decline sort of comes along with a lot of other negative trends in the film industry. And I would definitely be happy to watch short films before watching a feature film at the cinema, instead of having to watch advertisements for power companies.
I think that's the thing too. It's just like I forget when I read this or what the context was, but I remember reading like somebody wanted to like start putting short films before a feature film, but like all the cinema owners were like turning them down because like, no, that's where we put all our advertisements. It's just like, you're cutting out on so much precious funding for us. So it's like, which is, very disappointing, but also it's like, it's understandable because theaters themselves have constantly been just fighting to stay afloat. Because it's like they get nothing from ticket sales, so that's why you got like such high concessions prices and like so many advertisements before the feature and stuff. So it's just like they've got to make their money. And so when you have like even a 5-10 minute short film, that is going to drain so much potential ad revenue for them, as just like, so it's going to be really hard to convince them to air a short film unless you get it sponsored by some corporation, and just like have the Chevron on short film of the month or whatever. It's just 10-minute spot where it's just like you show the short film. They even have an interview, like a short little interview to fill out a 10-minute thing, and it's just like, just get some. And actually, that reminds me of like just a couple months ago, I went to see some movie or something, and just like before the movie, there was a short film, and it's just like this weird short film about this girl with a snow globe that could see the future or whatever. It's weird, and it's just like, and at the end of it is just like, brought to you by Chick-fil-A. It's just like, wait, this short has nothing to do with Chick-fil-A. How is this an advertisement? It went on for like 8 minutes too. So it was just like, what is this? And I looked it up, and it's like, apparently Chick-fil-A makes like or produces a short film, a Christmas short film, like every single year. And just like, I think before it was only like 2 or 3 minutes, but this year it was like an 8-minute short film. And it was just like, what is this? It's like, maybe.
And there's probably a subliminal homophobic message baked into it.
But the thing is, there wasn't. That's the whole thing. There wasn't any mention of any kind of food or Chick-fil-A product in there except with the branding at the end of it. And honestly, like I kind of like when we get through the best animated short category, like in 2024, part of me wants to do an episode on all of those short films because it kind of seems like an interesting well to dive into. But that's for the future. That's a story for another day. Do you have any thoughts about this short film we're actually talking about?
Oh, sorry, Munro.
Yes. You
Yes.
kind of lost the plot.
Sorry, I think I kind of stated how I feel about it, and I concur with a lot of what you have to say. I think it probably makes a strong case for simplicity. And I think this is an argument that people have a lot with feature-length films, and I'm constantly saying this. I feel like a lot of them could be shorter because I don't disapprove of movies that want to make a very simple point in a relatively blunt manner. If you're going to take 2.5 hours to do that, then it becomes a problem. Munro is not the subtlest film. You don't look at it and think, oh my goodness, it's so difficult to grasp what the message of this picture is. But it's very brief. It knows exactly what it wants to say, and it does it in such a direct manner that you can't really take issue with it. And personally, I felt as though it was a lot more effective than a lot of these war ethics that we get, that sort of become weighed down by the fact that at a certain point, they sort of become directionless, and it starts to feel as though the screenwriter doesn't know how to fill out the 3-hour running time.
Yeah, it's just like this short film really works because I feel it really works because it has a kind of like a children's storybook kind of cadence and pacing with it, and just like and that's a successful formula for this category. Like we've previously had nominees based on like Dr. Seuss stories and an adaptation of the Madeline books, and up to the modern day we've had like Hair Love, which was based on a children's book too. And so it's just like it when you just kind of fit that formula, it really works for a short film like this. And it's just like, but also on the topic of like war-based short films, this had me thinking a lot about like, so the live action short category is sort of infamous for how miserable a lot of the shorts are. And a lot of them especially focus on like child suffering or children dying. And so when I was watching this, I was thinking like, if this were made today, it would be a live action short film. It'd be 40 minutes long. And instead of the ending we have, which is like people find out Munro is a child and then they send him back and he has a happy ending, they would have him go to war and die, because it's like, that's just the kind of needless misery that the live action short category loves nowadays. And it's I don't know, it was just an idea I had.
Yes, I think it's certainly an intriguing concept. Sorry, I keep using that word. I'll stop.
It's intriguing.
Sorry, Christoph, who, like you, watches a lot of entries from these slightly more obscure categories, often complains about the fact that the live action short nominees are terrible. And they nominate these films that have no artistic merit. They tackle these very important, weighty themes in an incredibly clumsy manner. And I believe there was a very controversial one that won relatively recently that tried to deal with the issue of race.
Yes.
Was it called Two Distant Strangers?
Oh, yeah.
Was that
the thing is, you could have been talking about a few of them.
Oh, okay. No, I just remember
there's like
that
Two Distant Two Distant Strangers, but also Skin in 2018.
Oh.
Like Two Distant Strangers is like it's one of those time loop movies, except for instead of like Bill Murray, he lives the same day over and over again. It's romance, it's comedy. In this one, it's about like a black man gets killed by a cop over and over again. Isn't that just fun? And then Skin, that's a movie about like this child who's raised by skinheads. It's like he encounters like he has a friendly conversation with like this black man at a store, and of course his family like beats the guy to death, and then oh god, I don't even want to go through the rest of the plot. It's awful, and that it gets worse from there. It's god, I hate this the modern live action short category so much. There's so many good shorts that get nominated, but they never win. It's, oh god, it's infuriating. But I oh, and I'll just take this moment to address like a lot of people ask me like, hey, after the animated short category, do you think you'll move on to live action or documentary category? No, I will not. Because one, those shorts are a lot harder to find. Two, they're a lot longer. And three, they're a lot worse. They're dire straits in the live action and documentary category. Documentary category too is just so miserable. Also, there's so many that are just like, here's a sad thing, look at it for 40 minutes. That's your movie. God.
Oh god.
Let's get back to Munro. This is a happier territory right now. Okay, this is just a little story about a little guy. He's only 4. He's in the military, and nobody realized it. Isn't this sweet? Isn't this fun?
Yes, I think we were both fans of this one, and that means that I'm sort of interested to hear what you think about Goliath II.
Yes,
which is very different in many regards.
That's a good time to move on to it. So, I'll get into my paragraph. Our second nominee is Goliath II. Not Goliath II. It's Goliath II. Directed by Wolfgang Reitherman. You're fine. You're fine. I was very confused about what the title was before, watching it. But it's like in the opening thing, it's like they say, this is Goliath II. And it's like, okay, there we go. That's my answer. But yeah, directed by Wolfgang Reitherman. This is a 36th nomination for Walt Disney in this category. One notable thing about this film is that it was made to test out a new animation process, like the old Silly Symphonies were. This one was to test out the new Xerox process to transfer their pencil drawings to the animation cells and speed up the animation process, and also made it easier to animate multiple characters doing the same thing. This became very useful when Disney made 101 Dalmatians, since animating so many dogs would be very, very arduous without an easy copying method. And it is the reason for the scratchier Disney style of the 60s and 70s, and is also why so much animation got reused during this time. And it's like, if you look in the short film, you will see a lot of shots that are taken from like Dumbo, and like Peter Pan with the crocodile. It's just like, this era, they're very blatantly just reusing old animation. It's fun to point out. So Goliath II is about a small baby elephant who keeps finding himself in danger. Now, first off with the short film, I can't stress enough how unsettled I was by how small Goliath II is. He is so small, and it's just like they portray him as shorter than like a blade of grass. Like he's the same height as a mouse, or like it is unsettling how small this elephant is. I don't like it. It's just like, and part of me thought, like, when I was watching it, it's just like, they're so inconsistent with how small this elephant is. It's like they keep making him smaller and smaller, but no, it's just like, it's kind of the same size throughout. It's just ridiculously small elephant. And I guess that's the fun of the whole thing. Like, they want you to be like, oh, isn't it cute how small this elephant is? And then it's just like, of course, he gets lost very easily. But then it's just like, I just get nervous for this elephant, because it's like, and I guess yes, that's the point too, because like he could easily get trampled or whatever, or that's something they point out. But it's just like, He's too small. He's too small. And also, the short itself, it's just very tedious. I think it goes on for like 15 minutes, if I remember correctly. And it's just the same thing over and over again. It's just Goliath II, he goes out on his own and almost dies, but his mom is there to save him. And then it happens again and again and again. And then there's one time his mom can't save him and he has to stand up for himself. And then it's over. It's just he could have really shrunk this by like 10 minutes if you wanted to. But they didn't. And so we have the short we have.
This sort of stood out to me as one of those award nominees that I'm just going to assume got in because it displays this new technical innovation. And this tends to be a debate that comes up when films like this get nominated for Oscars. I think of something like The Robe, where back in 1953, you had opinion pieces where critics were arguing that it should win all the awards because look at the cinemascope on display. And I am thrilled that that movie did not triumph because it looks awful when viewed through modern eyes. And to be honest, in most cases, I feel as though movies that are recognized almost entirely because of technical innovations tend to age poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I disliked this as much as you did. I didn't really mind how repetitive it was at some points, but it's sort of is historical curiosity instead of being a short that I legitimately enjoyed. And I think you need context in order to be fascinated by it. If you just sat someone down with no background information on it, it's not terribly engaging.
So I feel like we're kind of in opposite spots with this. It's like you like Goliath II, I like The Robe. Oh, and it's just like
oh no. Okay. But
it's
what do
fine.
you like about The Robe?
What was it?
What do you like about The Robe?
I can't remember. It's been a long time since I watched it. I just remember just being engaged by it. I thought it was an engaging story. Of course, it looks gorgeous. It's just like it was an enjoyable movie. I really liked it. But back to Goliath II. You said that you thought it got nominated because of like the technical advancement with this, and I don't think it's that complicated. I think it just got nominated because it was something Disney put out this year, and so it got in because because Disney has been nominated 36 times in this category. I feel like at this point he's kind of just a Meryl Streep of this category, where it's just like every time there's something he puts out, he gets nominated. And I think there's only a few years where it's just like Disney had something eligible and it didn't get nominated. If any years. Because I haven't really looked into it like specifically, but yeah, Disney just it's one of the respected animation houses at this time, and they're one of the few people who are still making short films, albeit they got rid of their like short film specific animation studio and just kind of left the short films to like whenever they felt like it just using their feature animation division to make them. And so it's just like their short films become rarer, but it's also just they still make them like every few years. And so yeah, we got Goliath 2 or Goliath II. And it got nominated because it came out. Whether it had any quality to them, I don't think they really cared. It's just, oh, it's Disney. It gets in.
Okay, I understand that. Then again, you could say it's similar to The Robe in that in the 50s, it did feel as though every year there needed to be a slot for the big biblical epic that made tons of money. So
that is also true. Although I think you're right with on the robe, and that was mainly about like it was the first CinemaScope movie. People hadn't really seen movies that wide before, where it's just like,
Mhm.
wow, they can be a little bit bigger. That's crazy. And color
Oh,
too.
never experienced this. Oh,
Wow. If only there were blue cat people in this, I would really love it.
yes, of course. Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, Goliath II, it's just a standard Disney short film where there's a cute animal, it does things, and then
Hmm.
it's over.
Hmm.
And I just want to say it's just like we'll talk about oh, I guess we have talked about with like UPA and stuff, but it's just like Goliath II is kind of the reason we have things like Munro and like a lot of our future winners. It's like and eventual like Zagreb film and all that. And it's because they are specifically trying to be the antithesis of Disney because like so many animation studios that are like revolutionary, they specifically cite like, oh yeah, we hate Disney. We want to make something as far from that as possible. We don't like the
Hmm.
talking cute animals. We don't like the spoon-fed morals. It's just like, please, I just want something more artistic. And so that's how we get the likes of John Hubley. It's how we get Munro. It's how we get Ersatz. It's how we get a lot of this stuff.
Hmm.
Just through sheer hatred of Disney. And and that continues to the modern day. It's like that's how we got DreamWorks.
Right. Yes. We wouldn't have had the ants versus a bug's life debacle
Mhm.
without it.
Yeah, that's truly one of the most consistent fuelings of artistic inspiration, just sheer hate of Disney and the corporation and their animated films. And I think that's beautiful, truly. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
anything else you'd like to say about Goliath II? Any final
Not
thoughts?
necessarily. As you point out, there's not much meat on the bone here. And so it just doesn't feel as though there's a lot to dig into. And again, in context, it's more fascinating as a precursor to the Jungle Book
Hmm.
and Robin Hood and all of those. Obviously, they had already made plenty of animated features about adorable animals who sing, but they seem to go even further in that direction after this. And of course, footage from Goliath II was
Hmm.
incorporated into the Jungle Book. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's always fun being able to point out like, oh, Disney stole that animation from this thing. And just like in Goliath II, people point like on Letterboxd, I see like half the reviews are like, okay, this is a precursor to the Jungle Book. And it very much so is that they steal a lot of animation from this. Like half the elephant scenes are just reused animation from this. And that's fun. It's always fun. But yeah, we will move on to our third nominee, which is High Note, directed by Chuck Jones. So the official nominee for this and the next Warner Brothers short is just the studio Warner Brothers, making it hard to name any specific producer for these films. That's because John W. Burton left Warner Brothers this year, being replaced by David H. DePatie. And not only that, but I believe that there must have been something going on behind the scenes that blurred the lines between director and producer, considering that
Ooh.
next year, Chuck Jones and Friz Freeling are credited as producers on their own shorts instead of David DePatie, the head of the Warner Brothers studio at this time. In any case, I will credit the nominees in this way. So John W. Burton is a producer on both shorts, making this his third nomination. And I'll also credit Chuck Jones as a producer, making this his first nomination. And so back to the short itself. The short depicts the sheet music for the Blue Danube being put together by a bunch of notes anthropomorphized. However, when they're getting ready to perform, a note has gone missing and laying about in Little Brown Jug, meaning that it got drunk, in case you didn't get it. Zita, what did you think of High Note?
This is wacky. This is the sort of spirit that I sort of wanted Goliath II to possess, and I definitely get where they're coming from in trying to produce something that is slightly more irreverent than what you would usually get from this sort of short. It's great fun, it's nice and short, and it's snappy, beautifully animated as far as I could tell. And I also think that they managed to incorporate these classical compositions successfully, because this does seem to be a hurdle that certain filmmakers faced at the time. I know that you watch certain musicals from this period, and it feels as though the director is deeply disinterested in the musical numbers, but the film has been advertised as the new Irving Berlin joint, and that's what everyone is excited about. And even in the modern day, filmmakers will struggle to incorporate the Taylor Swift theme song into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this short does it pretty well. The transitions between the wackiness that goes on the side and their efforts to compose the music itself are very smooth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is definitely like a very well animated short film. It's well put together, I guess. As just like there's a really interesting stuff that they do with the music notes and his stuff. Uh I didn't love this short though. And the reason is that like I think there's only so many jokes that you can get out of this concept that they're doing here. And it just not many of those jokes that you can get are that funny to me. And it's just like even when you have like this master director Chuck Jones working on this, it's just like it doesn't come across as that funny when I watch it. It's just like, okay, this happens. And then this happens. This is a slapstick thing that's happening now. And it just kind of goes from set piece to set piece as just like I get that there's funny things happening on screen, but they don't make me laugh and they don't make me entertained. It's just stuff that's happening. And I wish I liked this more. And I think I used to like it more when I first watched this, when I first went through all these nominees, but it just doesn't it just feels it feels weird to say that this is a bit standard because it's like it's not a bit standard. This is a pretty unique concept to have like the music notes come to life and they're like playing the orchestra and whatever. I do like the part where they're like literally building like the whole the staff and like making the whole clefs and putting the sharps down and everything. And it's like that's creative to me, but it's just like once the drunk note gets introduced and just like and the short focuses solely on that it's just like I feel like there were more opportunities outside of that and they just didn't go with them, and that's a bit disappointing to me, but it's how it goes, I guess.
Well, clearly we are divided in terms of our views on this one, but that's always good.
Yes.
And I really it was hitting my pleasure centers, and it didn't necessarily strike you the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, it is good to disagree on this podcast. I feel like I agree too much with my guests.
Ah, well,
So
hmm.
and you and I we have had like on your podcast we've had plenty of disagreement, so it's just like it's good to bring that here
Hmm.
too.
Hmm. Yes. And I guess, sorry, I'm doing another segue, but the next one, Mouse and Garden, this seems like another one of the more traditional nominees in that there are a lot of Looney Tunes cartoons that get nominated during this period.
Mhm.
Do you think that it hits the same high standard set by the previous Looney Tunes nominees?
Uh so the thing about that is that uh Looney Tunes and Warner Brothers has a weird thing where they don't nominate their good shorts. And just
Oh,
like Mouse and Garden is like a typical Warner Brothers nominee where that it's fine. but it's nowhere near the heights that Warner Brothers is capable of and have gotten to. But it's just the Academy
Hmm.
rarely nominates those ones for whatever reason. Uh,
Uh,
but yeah, let's keep things on high note for a little bit. I feel
okay,
like there's more to talk about
sorry.
here.
Yes.
Uh, so yeah, do you? Or maybe there isn't. I guess. Do you have anything more to say about High Note?
Not necessarily. I liked it. I can't say that I have a whole lot to contribute from an analytical standpoint.
Like you started the episode off with like, I'm gonna get political about a lot of these shorts, and so
Well, okay, more specifically, the first one and
yes.
then the last one.
Oh, the
So
last one.
we'll
Okay.
get to it. Yes.
Yes, we will get to it there. Uh,
This one I felt didn't have that much depth, but who knows, maybe you felt that there was some underlying messages here.
I think this short ends up kind of pretty pro alcoholism in the end there. Like I
Well,
think it really does end up siding with the drunk note. Oh, and just like it's really sympathetic to his troubles of like not really wanting to go to work and just getting drunk and like wandering in like 5 minutes late, and then even when he gets there he's just causing a bunch of problems. And by the end he convinces a lot of his fellow notes to get in on the fun. And I do really like the ending gag, where it's just like they go to finally play the concert after they get the note in place, and then it gets to him, and all the other notes on the page are gone. And it's like all of them are in the Little Brown Jug sheet music. And meanwhile, the original drug note is over in How Dry I Am, which I didn't know that was a song, but whatever. And he changes it to How Dry We Am. And I don't know why, but just the phrase How Dry We Am just really got a kick out of me. It's just like it. I that kind of like bad grammar just I think is just intensely funny. But yeah, it's not a deep short. It's just, hey, there's a musical note that's drunk. Let's laugh about it for a little bit. And I guess like, and the thing about like short films at this time, it's like a lot of them do try to be like very artistically filling, like in terms of Hollywood at least. It's like a lot of them do try to be artistically fulfilled, but a lot of them are just trying to be like 7 minutes to pass the time before you actually watch the feature you're here for, because that's really what like in terms of like the business side, it's just like that's really what they were here for. Or they weren't here to be art or anything, they're just here as a brief distraction while you wait for your movie. And it's just like this works as that. This works as like a brief little distraction, but I don't know. I want more. Give me more, please, Chuck Jones. I want more intent, more humor, more artistry. And just like, and there is some of that there, but I want more. uh,
Yes, it's, and sorry, as an endorsement of alcoholism, it's not nearly as fun as The Thin Man, which is all about how getting drunk makes you sexy and saves your marriage. So,
the thing is, I don't really like the Thin Man much either, so maybe that's what they have in
oh
common.
God,
Like it's
how
fine.
horrifying.
And I like William Powell and Myrna Loy. It's just the first Thin Man movie is a little
Oh,
whatever.
oh,
I like the
okay.
second one more. Another Thin Man, is that what it's called? Or After the
No,
Thin Man?
that's the third one. After the Thin Man is the direct sequel.
Yeah, the one with Jimmy Stewart in it. Yeah, that one's
Mm.
fun. I like that one.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well,
we can move on to Mouse and Garden since you're itching to talk about it. Uh,
oh yes, desperate. This one.
oh,
Wow.
please let us talk about Mouse and Garden.
Wow.
It's the most interesting thing. So our fourth nominee is Mouse and Garden, directed by Friz Freleng. And I discussed the trouble with the nomination credit last time, so I'll just say that this is the fourth and final nomination for John W. Burton, and the first nomination for Friz Freleng. This is also the 7th nomination for Sylvester, our familiar friend, and the first and only nomination for Sam the cat, who is exclusively paired with Sylvester in his few shorts, sometimes as a friend, sometimes as a rival, but unfortunately never as a lover. It is quite funny, though, how many characters are exclusively Sylvester-centric, but Sylvester is never pinned down to anyone. Like, Tweety is exclusively, like, Sylvester. He's never in any short without Sylvester. But meanwhile, Sylvester goes and hangs out with, like, Speedy Gonzales and stuff. And it's just like, and Speedy Gonzales is kind of lucky. He didn't get the same fate as, like, Tweety, whereas only in Sylvester's shorts. But I guess he was just that popular that he was able to branch out a bit. But anyway, Mouse and Garden. Sam and Sylvester both find a mouse and each try to take the mouse for themselves, though each also pretends like they're going to share it. And the thing about Mouse and Garden is that, like, when I first watched it, it's like I apparently really loved it. It's like I gave it 4 stars on
Ooh.
Letterboxd or whatever, and it's just like I don't know why I did that, because watching it now, it's just like it's fine. It's like there's some good jokes in here, but it's just like it's nothing I'm going to remember in a few days. It's just as it's standard Looney Tunes. It's just it's just it's just a Sylvester cartoon where he and Sam both want a mouse, and there's some fun gags where they try to get the mouse. It's like they put the mouse in a little jar or a little brown jug, perhaps. And it's just like and then both of them try to sneak in the night and get the jug, like, for themselves, but it's always caught by the other cat before they can actually get it. And it's fun. It's fine. It's standard. What about you, Zita?
So would you say that it's evidence that you've sort of refined your palate over time, in that this short, which once bowled you over, now you look upon it with more discerning eyes and think, not so fast. You won't get by me.
I don't think so. I think I just might have been stupid before. Uh
Oh,
because it's like
no.
this is like a common thing that happens with a lot of the Looney Tunes shorts, where it's just like there's some that, like, I loved when I first watched them and I still love them now, like Birds Anonymous. There's some that I liked more than I liked before, like the first Speed Gonzales short. I think I appreciated more on a second watch than on, like, when I first watched it whenever her. And it's just like I think it's just something unique to this short, or where it's just like maybe I was more in a mood for it back whenever I watched it, but less so now. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing, and it's just like it was also probably in the same kind of setting that I watched it, because I almost certainly would have watched it, like, after watching Munro and Goliath II and High Note before it. So it's just like it pretty much recreated that whole uh environment I watched it in. But who knows? Maybe I I truly don't know why it dropped down so much. I'm just a different person now. I've changed. I don't like Mouse and Gardens much anymore, and I want to break up.
Oh, wow. You honestly, you sound like, have you seen that terrifying video on social media where I think it's a therapist
Oh yeah.
instructs you on how to break up with a friend, and
I
the language that she uses? No one should ever talk to a friend that way. Anyone that they have an interpersonal relationship with, they are not your employee. You should not be using HR language around them.
yeah, I've seen that, just very clinical, like very like you were saying, like very professional way to, like, tell a person you don't like them. It's just like if you are a friend with this person, you should have some kind of emotional connection with them. It's just like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's very strange. But yeah,
Anyway,
I, I don't like that you're comparing that to me, though. Like, that has me questioning a lot of things about myself.
no, 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 no. You're not impersonal and cold in your interactions with others. But, sorry, getting back to Mouse and Garden, I can sort of see what you're getting at, in that I haven't seen quite as many of these as you have, so I'm less experienced with it. And I do think that that probably increased my enjoyment of what is a fairly standard shot for this period, I'm going to assume. At the same time, from what little I've seen, I can sense that this movie does not go as hard in the paint as other Looney Tunes cartoons,
Mhm.
which receive a lot of praise for having these surrealist undertones and for allegedly being made by people who were taking a lot of drugs.
I mean, maybe. You don't know what they're doing behind the scenes at Warner Brothers.
No.
But yeah, I will say it's just like I have had a common complaint with Looney Tunes shorts like in this caliber, like a lot of these Sylvester shorts where it's just like he's hunting and mice or birds or whatever, where it's just very, very samey all the time. And it's just like all that happens is like there's a little setup and then it's failed attempt, failed attempt, failed attempt, failed attempt, the ending. And it's just like it's very, very standard and rote. It's just like they're just doing all these separate, distinct gags that have very clear beginning and ends and don't really flow into each other. It's just like it just feels like they, and this is probably how they do it too, but it's just like they just write a setup and then they go to the gag writers and be like, okay, we have this setup, what funny things can you think happen? And then you just bam, 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 listen to all these ideas, and then they narrow it down to what they think are the best ones, and then that's it. And that's the short. That's a very Looney Tunes thing specifically that I find like myself having distaste for. And that's because like I've talked about this a lot, but it's just like I think the Tom and Jerry shorts do this kind of thing better because they're somewhat similar in that they are a lot of like failed attempts like lined up in a row. But the thing is, it's that the Tom and Jerry shorts have a lot better flow about them. They move very well from one gag into the other, and the previous gags can affect the gags later on. But here it's just they're all very like caged off. It's just like they are all insular. And it's just there's no flow between them. It just feels like I'm crashing into a door each time and I have to open it into to get to the next part of it. And then it just right into another door, open it, go, keep going through. Meanwhile, like Tom and Jerry short, that's just like walking down a nice hallway.
Hmm. So they sort of have the sequelitis problem in that there's not enough connective tissue between each of the shots and well, a sense of continuity. It's not like these are Marvel movies or something where it's a big interconnected universe where the plot has to line up with the plot of the next shot. But from what it sounds like, it's almost unpleasant having to recalibrate your expectations every time you watch a new one.
Well, no, that's not even it's not even like about the like between each of the shorts. It's just about the short in itself.
Ah,
Oh, it's just like each distinct gag is like it doesn't flow into the other ones. It's just every joke is just like uh, its own little window, I guess. And it's just like you just move from the different frames. And it's just like, meanwhile, like like I was saying, a Tom and Jerry short that feels like one distinct experience. Like they all kind of go together. But it's just like there's no sense of flow in a short like this to me. Well, actually, I think this is a bit better than some of the worst examples. Like, well, I'll just say we'll get to a bit of a worse example next year or with another Looney Tunes pairing, but I'll just leave that as a little tease for next
mm.
episode. But uh but yeah, I think this Sylvester cartoon, Sylvester and Sam, I guess, has a bit better like there is more of a plot to it. There's jokes that are outside of the standard uh setup, the standard joke setup that they've got. It's just like they do kind of build like a whole thing here, here, but it's just like it still has a bit of that just sectioned offness that is a bit, I guess not off-putting is a bit strong of a word, but it's just it doesn't help my enjoyment of the short.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
I feel like to the people who like listen to this show every week, I sound like a broken record to them. It's
No,
just like
no,
because
no.
I bring this up all the time with the Sylvester shorts, and it's just like, uh, how do you guys keep listening to this?
But I assume it's interesting for them in that they get to go on an emotional journey with you. You are more invested in these shorts than the vast majority of people, and you legitimately care about whether they are of a high quality, and you want to believe that the people who made them give a damn
Mhm.
about them. And clearly, you're devastated when it's clear that someone just kind of was asleep at the wheel
Mhm.
while working on one of these.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it. It's just like I guess with my claim, like my shouting at Chuck Jones from beyond the grave, like to put more effort in his work. And now I'm doing the same with Fritz Frayling too.
Great name, I must note.
Oh yeah, Frizz Freeling. Uh,
Yes.
fun
And he was
fact.
also friends with someone called Ub Evax.
Oh yeah,
How do
works.
you even pronounce that?
Yeah, I
Iworks.
think it's
Okay.
iWorks. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What a name.
He was originally a collaborator with Walt Disney on like I think of iWorks actually made Mickey Mouse, but like Walt Disney kind of took the claim for it, or
Oh.
something along that lines, where it's like they both kind of did it, but it's like Walt ended up stealing all the fame and glory for himself, of course, because he's scum. Uh, but yeah. Uh, anyway, fun fact about Frizz Freeling: his first name is really Isidore. Isidore Freeling. So I'm
Hmm.
not sure if you like that more than Frizz, but
No, Frizz is the best nickname possible.
all right. Um, but yeah, anything else you'd like to say about Mouse and Garner? We didn't really get into any specific gags with this one, and because I kept
Um,
complaining about them in general, but anything specific in the short you really liked?
I wouldn't say so. It sort of washed over me. I wasn't as in love with it as I was with the high note. I thought that it was generally entertaining diversion, but clearly we want these shorts to aim a little bit higher than that, to be more than a programmer.
Hmm. All right, that's a good note to end on. So our fifth and final nominee is A Place in the Sun, directed by Franciszek Vistriso. Vistriso, yeah.
Ooh.
And his first and only Oscar nomination. And no, this is not the Elizabeth Taylor movie, of course, but rather yet another film produced in Czechoslovakia, with the original title be Omisto, wait, Omisto na Slunci. Uh, but this time, this is a wholly Czech production rather than Munro being two Americans making a film in Czechoslovakia, which is probably why this one is one of the most obscure and hard to find nominees in this whole category. Luckily, though, this is not lost, and it's also just easily available on YouTube. And I discovered that, like, the company or whatever, like, they have a YouTube channel. Well, and I'm going to discover the same thing about Zagreb Film next week. Hey, I recorded these out of order. I'm sorry. Uh, but yes. Where was I in my script? Yeah. Luckily, though, this is not lost, and I'd love to find out more about Vistristil, but all I can seem to find is that he also worked with Bratri Triku, which, if you remember, also worked with Rembrandt Films on Munro. Anyway, A Place in the Sun is about two people fighting to share one patch of sunlight. Zita, what did you think of our final short?
So, was I the only person who interpreted this as an allegory for communism or
Uh,
a pro-communist shot?
Thinking, I didn't think of that while I was watching it, but I was thinking about other shorts where I have thought about like, so there's this one short that's going to come later in the podcast called Balance, and you might have heard about it from Christoph. It's his favorite nominee in this category. And
Mhm.
it's like that one I have interpreted as have thought a lot about it as like a, and it's another short about like two people fighting to share the same thing, but they all are very selfish about it, and it hurts both of them. But yeah, it's just like putting it like that, it does feel like very like communism. And like, yeah, it's fun. Communism's fun.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then I guess if you wanted to go even further, maybe you could say it's not pro-communist and it's a movie about how humans are screwed because there's only a limited amount of sunny space in the world, and at the end of the day you have to kill off someone else in order to access it, and nobody really cares about one another, and it's impossible to implement communism, so at the end of the day we're all damned to eternity.
I don't think that's it because this short has a pretty happy ending. Like they learn to
Yes.
share. It's just like they both get the little patches. They can both be in the little patch of sunlight. And it's just like,
Hmm.
and it's just like that was how it was at the start of the short film. They were both sharing. It's just one or both of them just kind of got sick of sharing. So it's just like, hey, I want this all for myself. And it's like, no, I want this for all myself. Oh, and it's just like they fight. And it's like they can share. It's like Balance maybe that has a bit more of a downbeat ending. It's like maybe you could make an argument with that. But for this one, they sharing has a good ending. It's just like they want each other to share. So it's just like, hey, why don't we all just as people just be nice to each other, share what little resources we have, and just like make this a good place for all of us. It's a
Hmm.
good place in the sun.
Yes. And I imagine, oh no, it probably had a different title over there. Because whenever a sort of modern film adopts the title of a very famous old movie, I always think it's an interesting choice. Sometimes it's done deliberately, but I often think there are plenty of names out there. You could have come up with something new. And at least in this case, the contents of the short have almost nothing to do with what happens in the Theodore Dreiser novel. So,
Uh, so I did look up like the original title and put into Google Translate, and it does literally translate as A Place in the Sun. So it's like
hmm.
it, and that makes sense because it literally make it's literally about two people fighting for a place in the sun. So it's just like the title makes
Mm.
more sense for this than it does the
Mm.
Elizabeth Taylor movie,
Yes,
or I guess the original novel that it's based on, or play, or whatever. I forget.
right.
I
Yes.
But
Do
yeah,
you think that the contents of this short would have been altered if, because I'm going to assume that these characters are both men,
I think
as
so.
drawn they seem to be. Would it change if they were women? Would their fighting tactics be different?
Hmm. Now you're asking me to put like gender assumptions on onto
Yes, sorry.
so like
I just think it's the classic Lord of the Flies question. If you were ever forced to discuss that book in high school, one of the big questions that they ask is, would the plot of the novel be different if they were all girls? And in this case, you could argue that the plot is somewhat similar. Would it be changed if, say, they were elderly, or if their personalities were significantly altered in some way?
well, yes, I think a big part of it is like the idea is that these are two people who are like already predisposed to like to want things for themselves, and it's just like when they aren't satisfied with the amount that they have, it's just like they would like more of it, and so that's where all the problems start. And it's just like when you have, and like that is also like a very something that is drilled into like a lot of like men as children. A lot of taught to like boys is like how to be men is to like to take what you want. It's just like, meanwhile, when it like women are socialized to be a lot more like to give up what they have for someone else, or at best to like share it. So it's just like, I guess, and if the animators had decided to tell this story with two like female coded characters, it I guess you wouldn't really have a story. They'd just be two women chilling in the sunlight, and well, I guess that'd be a much nicer movie. That'd be nice. It's like two girls having fun together in the sun.
Oh, hanging out.
And then with like two old people, if like you mentioned the elderly, it's like it was just two old people. I feel like they wouldn't have the energy to fight over it. It's just like, yeah,
Mm.
you could stay here too. I know. I'm not getting up.
Mm.
So yeah,
Helen Mirren in The Leisure Seeker. Anyway, sorry.
It's the best exotic marigold sunlight.
Yes.
Uh, I don't know why you just bringing up the leisure seekers out of nowhere. That really got me. Uh, yeah. So this is a good short, I think. Like, I feel like we didn't really talk about like much about the comedy in this, but it's just like I think this is a good uh it's not a long short, and so I think it does well with the time that it has and really develops it in an interesting way. Although I think my one complaint with it is that it is just a static frame that we are looking at the whole time. It's just like there's no different camera angles or anything, and it's just like we're just looking at this very front-facing view. And so it almost feels like this is something that could be adapted into like a play or something. And it's just like you could very
Oh,
easily
yes.
like
We're
have,
waiting for the dough.
yeah, and so it's just like, and just thinking like I don't think there's anything in this that you couldn't adapt to a stage with a bit of creative engineering. Like there's a part where it's just like where one of the characters takes like one of the waves from the background and then like puts it down on the ground and starts like diving in it. But I think if you had like a whole like a escape hatch or whatever in your stage that opens and closes whenever you want it to, I think you could even do that. Or like, and there's even a point where like they pull like darkness from the side of the frame. It's just like I feel like you could also do that with like the curtains on the stage. It's like you close that and it's just like suddenly there's no more sunlight or anything. It's just like, yeah, I feel like this could make a good little stage play, like a little, I'm not sure what a short play is called. I feel like there's a specific term, but I can't think of it. But yeah, I feel like this could be a really like a one act or something. I don't know. Not even that really. It is a bit short is the thing, but I feel like you could make this work, especially if you like ham it up for the audience too, like really try and milk out all those laughs. You could get it up to like 20-30 minutes if you wanted to. But yeah,
Yes,
just
that's
an
the
idea.
thing. And I think because the concept is so bare bones, obviously, if you wanted to adapt it into something a bit longer, it would be very easy to insert a political subtext in there or to turn this into a story about, let's say, have you seen the Alec Baldwin movie, The Edge?
No, I have not. Never even heard
So
of it.
he and Anthony Hopkins have to murder a bear that has been menacing them, but they are torn apart when Anthony Hopkins learns that his young gold-digging wife, played by Elle Macpherson, had an affair with Alec Baldwin. And so now the two men, they're fighting each other in addition to fighting the elements. And will they be able to survive? Do they like one another enough to want to live?
Oh my God, this movie sounds so stupid. I want to see it
Written
now.
by acclaimed playwright David Mamet.
Oh, of course it's Mammoth.
Yes. Father of one of the girls.
Oh God, that that sounds so stupid. Like, but yeah, like this. You were saying like, what if this film had political subtext? It's like it in your point of view, it does have political subtext
But
already.
it does already. But I'm saying you could include long scenes in which European art house film style, they bring up philosophers and they make vague references to the bourgeoisie and how much they disapprove of their behavior.
Yeah, just like double the length of it, where it's just like every other second there's just a name pops up of like a communist philosopher that is just like Marx, Mao, Engels.
Yes.
Every second it's just like just pop up another name. You can stretch this out. Oh, it'll be good. Trust me.
Hmm.
Oh God.
Yes.
Imagine like Jean-Luc Godard's A Place in the Sun.
Yes. Oh gosh, that would be a nightmare.
Yeah. Oh, it would have like
3D.
it would have like Jean-Paul Belmondo, oh, and then like I don't know, one of his other male actors. But then you would also have oh, I can't remember her name now. Who's the actress that's in all of Godard's movies? Like in her all
With his
his
early ones,
yeah,
Anna
60.
Karina.
Yes. As Anna Karina, just have her as like a third character in this who's like I guess like maybe they're just both lusting after her or something. It's like while they're
Hmm.
also wanting the place in the sun. It's like they want to get into her place in the sun. You know what I mean?
Oh wow,
Her
gosh, we're
place where the
going
sun
there.
don't shine.
Hmm. Yes.
God.
But it's a Godard movie, so they also have to resent her for being attractive
Mhm,
and mock her for doing things like brushing her hair, which is such bourgeois behavior
mhm.
at the end of the day. And, really, if she were legitimately class conscious, she wouldn't be so vain and she would never wash her hair. Jake Gyllenhaal style.
Oh God! Now I kind of want this. Just unfortunately, we can't resurrect Jean-Luc Godard and force him to make a remake of A Place in the Sun, not the Elizabeth Taylor one. uh, I kind
Although
of want
that
that.
would be funny too, if he took Elizabeth Taylor's A Place in the Sun and cast Isabelle Huppert in it or something. That would be funny.
Maybe. Oh God, who would he get to be like the Shelley Winters character?
Oh, Natalie By.
Ooh. Actually, now that we're talking about it, I feel like the French would do a lot of weird, fun stuff with A Place in the Sun, and
Mm,
like
yes.
I usually don't have nice thing to say about French movies, but I think they would make a killer remake of A Place in the Sun.
Mm.
All right, I feel like we've kind of dug the Place in the Sun well deep enough. I
Yes, we have.
So, and now we've gone through our five nominees, and now
Mm.
we shall rank them all as we always do. And Zeta, start us off with your number five.
So my number five would be, and I've sort of switched things up here, but I'm actually going to go with the one that I defended earlier. So we're going to pick Mouse and Garden.
Ooh, you want to elaborate a little bit?
Well, so I didn't hate it as much as you did, but it definitely has a lack of distinguishing features. And in this field, you really do need to stand out. At least other film, which I will bring up later, is historically fascinating and sort of has this place in the firmament that is interesting to consider.
A Place in the Firmament. Now that's a movie I want to see.
Yes.
Uh, I'm so I didn't think it came across like I hated Mouse and Garden. I thought
Well,
I said
okay.
it was fine, but okay. My number 5 is Goliath II, which, as I was saying, it's just a tedious short film that gets very repetitive, very quick, even with its 15, like I guess 50-minute is a long time in this kind of space. But yeah, it's tedious. What's your number 4, Zita?
So my number 4 would be Goliath II for the reasons that we discussed. It's not terribly fascinating. It did not hold my interest.
So my number 4 is High Note, which, as I was saying before, I can appreciate some of like the creative setup that we've got here, where it's just like you anthropomorphize these music notes, and it's just like there's some cute little things there, but it's just like it it just doesn't have the good enough jokes that it needs to make this like a really fun short. And it's just like it spends way too long on the drunk note. It's just like I don't care about it. I want more different things in this than just this one joke extended for like half the runtime. What's your number 3?
So my number 3, and this is where things get difficult because you have shots that I actually really like at this point, but I think I would put High Note third, much as I like it, but it doesn't have that special something that sets the other two apart from the rest.
And my number 3 is Mouse and Garden. It's just like it's a very, very standard Looney Tunes cartoon. And there were some good jokes in there, but it's just very standard and it's fine. It's nothing special. It's a good time waster, but nothing much beyond that. What's your number 2?
So, number 2 is A Place in the Sun. I think it has a lot of creativity and ingenuity to display, but I don't know whether it can fully compete with my number 1, which is
Of
the
course.
most fully realized of the 5 shots.
Hmm. My number 2 is also A Place in the Sun, and it is a good concept. It is well executed. It's fun, but at the same time, it's a little too bare bones to really make me love it. But it's still a good short. I'm very glad it got nominated, despite the competition, the uphill battle it had to get for itself. And then our number 1, we seem to agree here, is Munro, which,
Woo!
of course, it's like I like between when I first watched the short and when I rewatched it for this, I had watched it randomly just because it stuck in my mind that much. It's just like I had to rewatch it again because it's just like, oh, I remember really liking this short film. And on that second watch too, it's just like I still loved it so much. It's such a great example of how a short film can work and should work. And it's so perfectly distilled into this one little thing. And it's just this is Monroe is a short that you could teach in a class and be like, this here is why this works. This is why it's a good short film. And it's just like the students would get it. I think they'd also like it because it's something that's very accessible, something easy to get into. Like it has, like I said, it has that storybook child's storybook quality that makes it very easy and accessible.
Hmm. Yes, and this is one of those rare cases in which we find ourselves agreeing with the Academy in terms of their judgment. So this year they didn't mess things up.
Yes. Yeah, it is actually now I haven't really been keeping track, but I'm curious like how often I do agree with the Academy on these kind of things because I think it happens more often than it does in like Best Picture or something, but also like there are a lot of times when they get it wrong. So I'm not entirely sure.
Hmm. Yes. And as someone who has gone through Best Picture and all of the nominees there, I can tell you that they, more often than not, get it wrong in that category. So it was a relief to see that they made the right choice here.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I'm looking at my so I have a spreadsheet for just like all the Oscar categories and like which winners I agree with, which ones I don't. It's just like this is the first one I've agreed with since Speedy Gonzalez, which was 5 years ago, and it was 5 years before that when I agreed with another winner. And so it's just like it is pretty intermittent when I agree with the winner. But, so yeah, good job, Academy. You got it right.
Yes.
Though I would have been surprised if they had voted. I would have been a bit surprised if they voted with the winner in any of these other or voted for any of these other shorts because they are not as good as Munro. Especially with last year, they also picked a independent winner instead of a studio one. So, but yeah. So, uh, before we end our show, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share, Zita, or anything you'd like to promote?
Well, I very much enjoyed discussing this year. I think this is one of the stronger lineups that we've talked about. And I'm excited for you that you get to start discussing a wider range of nominees. So I'm really looking forward to listening to future episodes. And then in terms of my podcast, you can find it on most podcast hosting platforms. I discuss romantic movies. You have been on many times as a guest to discuss films, both good and bad, but we find things to say about them. And at this point in time, I've been talking about Goodbye, Mr. Chips and an array of other British period pieces. So it's been interesting over the past few months to really delve into those.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody please check out Zita's podcast. Like if you're listening to this, you probably already listened to her anyway. So but still, just don't forget to listen to whatever her newest episode is when this comes out. It's going to come out on February 2nd. So uh, just make sure you're listening to it, just in case you haven't yet. uh, well, thank you, Zita, for coming on the show again. And thank you, listener, for tuning in. This has been the short podcast about short films. Until next time, goodbye.